Welcome Mazer students to the 2020 Last Lecture Essay Contest. We would like to welcome today's judges, Mr. Simmons, Mrs. Ellis, Miss Gerber, Mrs. Slade, Miss Goodrich, and Miss Moser. The winner of today's contest will receive $100 cash. Second place winner will receive $50 cash, and third place will receive a $25 gift card. We are going to start off with a sacrificial essay to warm up the crowd. Our senior will be called from the audience to read his essay, but it will not be part of the competition. This year's sacrificial poet is Wesley Hadfield.
The weirdest things I have ever done. Number 1. Sophomore year, Ammon Hassan paid me $5 to lick the mold off of the drainage pipe at Coldstone. Can you believe that? The chump paid me to eat free food. Number 28. I consumed 35 oranges in 83 seconds just to prove that I could. Number 79. I found a lifetime friend named Thomas Vick who is somehow weirder than me, which leads me to number 80, the time that I traveled to Switzerland with Thomas, and despite the fact that we stayed in a 3-bedroom apartment, we shared a twin bed for 2 weeks because I was afraid of the dark. Number 94. I made a Mazer meme Instagram account. Number 103, I played Mufasa in a local theater's rendition of The Lion King. And number 104, I showed up at football practice in a full set of Mufasa makeup and told the quarterback that it was because I had a big piano recital. As if that was somehow better. Number 125, I'm sorely afraid of my best friend in the world. Number 126, my best friend in the world is my mother. I don't chew my nails because I'm nervous. I chew them because I'm hungry. I drink more hot chocolate than water. Sometimes I try to make the snipe noise from the movie Up. I bought flip-flops for my girlfriends as a 3-year-old. My gamer tag is WazzleDaddy77. And number 215, I chose to be a middle school soccer coach for a bunch of stinky tweens and liked it. Number 411, I chose to stay at Mazer. Number 412, I thought that because I was weird, the kids at Mazer would, for some outrageous reason, love me less, or wouldn't love me at all. That may be the weirdest, most laughable thought that has ever crossed my mind. Somebody who thinks a Mazer student wouldn't love another human being for being weird clearly hasn't spoken to Mr. Dowdle about Comic-Con. Or Mrs. Smith about show choir, for that matter. Somebody who thinks being weird at Mazer is alienating clearly hasn't waltzed down the middle school hallway during Spirit Week. Somebody that assumes they are a misfit at Mazer surely does not understand the culture that we, as students, have fought so hard to create and preserve. Everybody knows that we're a group of misfits and that we are a herd of freaks, but the weirdest thing a student at Carl G. Mazer Preparatory Academy could possibly perceive is that they aren't loved because of their uniqueness. Number 400. I sing Puff the Magic Dragon to myself at night. Thomas Vick talks like Kronk from Emperor's New Groove when impersonating adults. Kara Hahn puts toothpaste on her forehead before she goes to bed. John Hendricks likes airplanes more than people. Ethan Linsky read encyclopedias instead of Harry Potter as a child. Cody Wilkins is short. Becca Linford had a crush on me in 5th grade. In the end, the only thing that we all have in common is the mutual recognition that diversity is excellence. That's the lesson that the class of 2020 has worked to preserve, as have the graduating classes before us have for the last decade. It is the responsibility that we leave on your shoulders as we pass the baton. Promote your differences, recognize the accepting culture that we have strived to produce, and treasure it infinitely. Finally, recognize that we are all rooting for you to embrace your bizarre tendencies, recognize the excellence in diversity, and embrace your list of the weirdest things I have ever done.
Without further ado, let's begin the competition. First, we will have Emma Hailstone.
Keep it up. The average human head weighs approximately 10 to 11 pounds. This is around the size and weight of your average bowling ball. Due to our infinite access to technology and information, our heads are constantly looking down at our phones, computers, and tablets. The more we have our heads down, the more weight and strain it puts upon our necks and eventually our spinal cords. But we do not only hang our heads when using technology. I will always hate the Joe High soccer field. I was a shy, nerdy sophomore feeling very out of place as Mazer's varsity left back. The only reason I was on the varsity team was because our stopper, Danny Chesler, had torn her ACL and they needed another defensive player. I had played very few full-fledged varsity games, and I did not know what I was doing or how I could possibly help fill the hole that Danny had left in our defensive line. My heart and mind were racing as I tried to keep up with the confident, fast, and physical girls that seemed to fly past me in Joab's black and gold uniforms. I remember their wing coming down the left side of the field and crossing it to the center of our 18-yard box. As the ball was flying through the air, all I knew was that it was my responsibility to reach that ball first. My excitement of intercepting the pass with a seemingly perfect chest trap turned to utter horror as the ball bounced off my chest directly towards the goal I was supposed to be defending. Time seemed to stop as I watched the ball fly directly through our keeper Savannah's hands and hit the back of the net. Everything was a blur except for the look of disappointment on my teammates' faces and the stream of hot tears that were mixing with the sweat on my face. I had failed everyone, my coach, my friends, my team. I hated myself for thinking that I could ever be good enough to be on this team or to play this sport. I lost all confidence in myself and I hung my head as the final whistle blew. We lost that game terribly. The next summer at tryouts, I was determined to be a better asset to the team. I was working hard but still made a lot of mistakes. After one particularly bad pass, I put my head down to hide the tears trying to burst from my eyes. I heard Becca Limford, our team captain, call my name. "Emma," she said, "I don't care what mistake you make. You are not allowed to put your head down." And with a quick love tap on the shoulder, she went back to the drill. I was caught off guard, but I continued on with tryouts as best I could. My ankle flopped as I attempted to cross to midfield, and the ball crawled to a stop yards before its destination. Instantly, my eyes dropped to the grass in humiliation. "Emma," Becca called, and immediately I snapped my head up and ran to the next position, forcing myself to focus on keeping my eyes up. I had not realized that I even had this habit, and I did not only do it on the soccer field. My head would hang if I did not understand the concept being explained in math class, and I would fall further behind as I beat myself up for not being smart enough. The floor became my only comfort after stuttering through hastily memorized monologues for Shakespeare auditions. I walked through the hallways with my head down so I would not have to meet the eyes of the people I so desperately wanted to impress. I believed that keeping my eyes on the ground would somehow hide my flaws, but in reality it only drove me further away from the goals that I was striving to reach. Our generation already spends copious amounts of time with our heads down. We are not only consumed by technology, but by our own mistakes and fear of imperfection. Friends, you have the ability to make a difference in the lives of everyone around you, but you will never reach your full potential if your head is kept down by your weaknesses. It may feel like you're trying to balance a bowling ball on a blade of grass, but keep your head up. One simple change in posture can change everything. Thank you.
Next, we will have Thomas Vick.
Relearning to learn. Freshman year, my life took a huge turn. My mom passed away. It was the hardest thing that had ever happened to me. To preface, let me tell you a little bit about her. Her name is Christine. She loves classical music. Her favorite color is red. I could tell her about anything in the whole wide world, and she would always just understand. And she changed people's lives. She changed mine. So now I'm going to share with all of you some of what Christine did for me. First of all, she showed me how to love a good book, how to run home, jump in bed, and disappear inside another world for hours. And then Mrs. Smith taught me that a book could change my life. That Jean Valjean isn't just some character in a book, but that now he's a little part of Thomas Vick. Christine showed me that I had someone who would always be behind me. She showed me when she drove to cheer me on at every one of my soccer games, no matter how far. And then I saw that I had a team behind me. I saw when I scored my first varsity goal and my teammates rushed to me with flushed faces and their eyes glowed with the same joy that mine did. She showed me that school's important. She showed me by being the smartest person I ever knew. She showed me by giving up her time to help me with every assignment I struggled with. And then Mrs. McDuff showed me that the things I learned in school could benefit me my entire life. $25 a month now is hundreds of thousands in the future. Get investing, people. Christine showed me how to pick good friends. She showed me when I saw the excitement on her face as she picked up the phone to answer a call from her childhood best friend. And then at Mazer, I didn't have to pick good friends, because you all picked me the second I walked through those big pillars out front. She showed me that tough love helps you grow. She showed me when she let me figure out problems on my own and ignored my incessant whining. And then Mr. Watabe showed me that something good can actually come from running a 17-9 at practice. And believe it or not, you can learn from that soul-crushing experience of not knowing the right answer when he calls on you in math, or even worse, when you confidently state the wrong one. She showed me how to be strong. She showed me when she would come home to my room after a round of chemo and make sure that my trivial day of middle school had been A-okay. And then Mrs. Cannon showed me how to take the pain of the ones you love and turn it into something beautiful. She showed me every time she talked about her daughter and helped us all become a little better. And Christine made me cry. She made me cry because I missed her. And then I laughed. I laughed because Mr. Simmons told my class a story about his own dumb self in high school because he knew that's what we needed to hear that day. So why? Why do I share Christine with you? Because Christine's my mom, and she taught me everything I know. And she may be gone, but she'll be with me forever. And you guys, you're my family. You managed to teach me too. And though it's time for me to leave this family, it's one that will never leave me. The person on your right and the person on your left, they're your family. So learn from them. And as you continue on with your lives, in class, in sports, in print comm, in drama, I just want you to remember what I learned from Christine and what you learn every day from your Mazer family. And then you can leave this place like I'm about to. Not knowing everything, not as a perfect person, but you'll be just a little bit better than when you first walked in. And I promise you'll be just a little more prepared for the next great adventure life has in store for you.
Next, we will have Jacob Yanchar.
Real cosmic horrors. I've been lied to. After finishing all this was nothing like High School Musical. There were very few dance numbers, and I look nothing like Zac Efron. In fact, I find it closer to another genre other than High School Musical's beloved rom-drum common song. It's closer to a horror film. I'll help connect the dots with a few stories. One soccer game, while playing goalkeeper and facing down ALA's legendary Joe Valle, I was put in a one-on-one situation, David facing Goliath. But, unlike the biblical hero, I left the battlefield with less glory and more grass between my teeth. A year earlier, somebody should have seen the look on my face when I saw that I was the only boy on the fashion statement win term list. It was like that of a stone man after witnessing the Medusa wearing Prada. And more recently than I'd care to admit, I was able to viscerally feel what the authors of the cosmic horror genre had been speaking of for ages, an unknowable and terrifying entity, a teenage girl. I'd hoped to get a phone number for a date sometime. Upon walking up to her, the little people pulling levers inside of my head suddenly decided to take some vacation time. In my eyes, the lights were on, but nobody was home. I forgot how to put a number into my phone and said to the unfortunate recipient of this conversation, my phone isn't working. I'll just write the number down. I allegedly wrote it down on my excerpt of Alexander Pope, which then required a handwriting expert and 15 minutes of careful deciphering to even hope to have an accurate translation. I share all of this to say, I know horror. However, this terror isn't necessarily unique to me. Rather, it is that high school and middle school are by nature very scary. While the trials I described before are real, it was a greater trial to go to my next class after a particularly disturbing lesson on the Holocaust. There are other examples like this. Knowing I had 8 challenging class periods and no time after school proved daunting. I worried for so long about my college admissions that I cried about getting into my college of choice with more emotion than I've ever felt over any sporting event. The raw perseverance required to finish sophomore spring finals, even with questionable success, was by far harder than the sum of its exams. If I feel emotional distress now, it's not actually due to my awkward interactions and sports failures. It's simple despair from the horror of it all. It's sleeping on the floor for a week because the ground can hold you tighter than a mattress. It's showering in the complete dark, watching the colors that only come in the dark wash over you. It's finding yourself 2 miles up the canyon with tears in your eyes. Our life is composed of challenging experiences, and if we decide to regularly go it alone in this struggle, this terror, our lives will be filled with it. There will be no need to watch Nightmare on Elm Street or read H.P. Lovecraft on the weekends. We will be living through it ourselves. It's easy to let your school experience be turned into a lonely cosmic horror. I think there is a solution. Sometimes the relief required after being tormented by a proverbial monster is only found in the embrace of someone you're close with, not the ground. After being secluded in the creature of your own emotions, the best course of action can be to talk out your feelings with a friend in a parking lot, listening to Ribs by Lord and arguing intently about whether ice cream can have a nice chew or not. For so many years, I decided to fight a battle against my own graphic slasher film. I chose to go it alone. Only recently did I decide to truly let people in and let them make fun of how terrible the movie is. Because if there's one thing I know about horror movies, other than that they are often scary, it is that they can be, with the right people, the most corny and laughable things you've ever seen. Searching for help and support through our trials is not weakness, it is survival. It is through this process of preserving along with others that I believe that you too can survive through your own cosmic horror. Thank you.
Next will be Carson Bailey.
The better story. As the rain began to pour, the enemy materialized. It was a dark, thick, gooey presence. As the foremost knights in the kingdom, it was the Bailey boys' calling and duty to defeat this monster. After donning our armor and strapping into our boots, Clark slid back the castle gate and we charged forth to slay the beast. Our initial efforts seemed to be forcing it into retreat, but the harder we fought, the deeper we sank into the behemoth's black-brown soup. The deeper we plunged, the more we strained to hoist our boot-shod feet back to the surface, until finally we were caught in the fiend's hideous spell. We were cemented in place. The Bailey brothers were defeated and bitterly hung our heads in shame. Then we wailed for the fearless, undefeatable Queen of the Realm. Only she could save us in our darkest hour. Upon hearing our desperate call, Mom walked out into the backyard, smiled as she saw our snowboot-dressed feet drowned in muck, took a few pictures, and pulled us out of the muddy garden in the far corner of the yard. After getting hosed off to rid ourselves of the final remnants of the earthy Leviathan, Clark and I went inside through the sliding glass door and shrugged off our armor. Rain jackets. This grand tale of daring courage stands tall in Bailey family lore and forms a cornerstone of my childhood memories. This year in Senior Socratic, we studied Life of Pi by Jan Martel. Without spoiling too much of the story, following the sinking of his ship, Pi, the main character, tells of his voyage across the Pacific Ocean in a lifeboat with a tiger on board. At the end of the book, Pi tells another story that parallels the first, but lacks its beauty and meaning. When I read this second ending, I was initially deeply offended. Pi just spent 300 pages detailing his conversion to religion, followed by how that conversion had aided him in his demanding journey across the sea. This second story seemed to say that was all just a hoax Pi had invented to hide from his painful reality. But in a Socratic discussion on Zoom, my classmates helped me to realize the truth of what Martel was saying. The first story with the tiger is not a deceitful mechanism to hide the truth. It was Pi's way of saying, the first story with the tiger, it was Pi's way of learning from and demonstrating principles he found in his tragic adventure. I remain unsure which version is true, but I discovered the power of telling the better story, even if that story isn't rooted so much in fact as it is in the emotional power of the moment. My backyard adventure with Clark was full of both fantasy and interpretation. We never were knights captured by a fierce mud demon. On our other adventures, Clark and I never actually faced off in a rugged western town as sheriff and outlaw, nor did we fly to the moon in our homemade rocket. However, these fanciful tales of heroic action contain the joy of my childhood. It is not in the rote details of slogging through a soggy garden that would have been forgotten days or weeks later, but in the better story of my runaway imagination that I created that joy. The key was to spin the non-essential technicalities into a fantasy that more realistically represented the feelings of the experience. High school is no different. We have junctures with fate, winning a soccer game, losing a basketball game, stumbling through a Socratic discussion on a reading I should have done the night before, missed opportunities for growth that I'm ashamed of, screaming, "There's nothing like a dame" in Broadway Rocks, discussing how to navigate the woes of high school drama with Mr. Simmons and the boys after practice. As individual events, these memories make up the good old days that I will remember for years to come. But it is the romance, background, potent emotions, and interpretation that make stories worth listening to, but more importantly, worth learning from. I am not telling you to fabricate stories to teach artificial lessons, but there is immense value in recognizing the powerful lessons that can be learned in the deep emotions of seemingly insignificant moments. The moments of high school are essential and wonderful, but it is how we turn those moments on the muddy potter's wheel of fantasy and principle into better stories that shape and define us that really matters. Thank you.
Next, we will have Mikey Roberts.
Don't be that guy. Man, I remember the first day of 7th grade like it was... Wow. 6 years, huh? Dang. Where did all the time go? Oh yeah, to Mazer. I forgot. Mazer is its own dimension. Years turn into seconds. Classes last an eternity. Teachers turn into life coaches and friends. Deans turn into dumpster firefighters, and SOAR stays boring as heck. I guess this is it. This is my senior year, isn't it? What's my legacy? This has been a question for 6 years of my life. Knowing that this doomsday clock is ticking down, I have erased and rewritten this now 6 different times. Some of you seniors out there already have this written, and to that I applaud you. For me, Impossible. Nothing. My head is empty. There isn't a legacy that I can think of. Brendan Murphy, Ammon Hassan, and I built a boat in 10th grade. But I don't have that boat anymore. I was starting second baseman for 2 years in a row for our very own baseball team, but I'm graduating. I was on the track team until our season was taken away from us. I would say that I'm a graduate from Carl G. Mazur, but I haven't done that yet. I can be funny during class, but I guess I won't have any classes here anymore, will I? I got it. Don't be that guy. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We all know. That guy is someone who will walk behind his crush and kick their knees out. They're the type of person that will go into the bathroom, get wet paper towels, and throw them on the ceiling to see whose would stick the longest. They constantly don't care about their grades, and they don't care about other people. They have a sense of entitlement, as if the whole school owes them something. I'm here to tell you, hey, can you not be that way? This is completely unheard of from a last lecture, but I'm going to ask for some audience participation. Now, keep in mind, this is very important for that guy to hear. And I'm sure that Gerber has dreamt of doing this for many years now. But on the count of 3, we're all going to say, don't be that guy, together. 1, 2, 3. Don't be that guy. Great. Now that the people around you know that you just responded to a video like a child watching Dora, I can move on. You might be wondering, hey Mikey, how do I not be that guy? To that, I say it's easy. Just be nice. I've done it for 6 years, or at least tried to. Service has been my main motivation for these past 6 years, and I can genuinely say that has helped me become the person I want to be today. When I look back on the years that I have spent asking people what I can do to help, I can't help but want to help someone again and again. Once, one of my friends was having a hard time, so I brought her some ice cream. Sure, this isn't a big gesture, ice cream for a friend, but I can tell you that she probably still thinks about it sometimes. In conclusion, Mazur, the last thing I want to leave with you is a reminder that any gesture, big or small, counts against any points earned from being that guy. If what I've done matters, then what you've done matters just as much, if not more. I've been here 6 years and known a lot of those guys. But I can say through my service, instead of being that guy, I'm me. Thank you.
Next, we will have Maddy Fairbanks.
Senior year horror. If a horror movie wants to really be classic, it needs 4 elements. First, a blonde girl tripping over everything in her path while hysterically running away from a monster. Second, a shower or bathtub scene in which a character either gets attacked, dies, or just stares dramatically at their shampoo bottle with water streaming down them as they contemplate the meanings of their existence. Third, there must be some sort of love interest who either saves the day, dies, or runs away. And finally, if a movie is really classic, it'll have some world-changing event or twist. Going through high school, a lot of my friends found it strange that I liked these types of movies, but it's good I do since my senior year fit all the criteria. I found myself playing the role of a frantic blonde lady as I tripped up the stairs at least once a week with shorter passing periods and stricter attendance policies rushing me. I saw my preparation for the role in show choir when Miss Smith had us run in place while singing Thriller. I also felt the weight of the role in show choir's faculty Christmas performance as I watched Josh struggle to keep piles of cups and plates from falling, basses tripping over the piano cord, unplugging it, Carson scrambling to plug the piano back in, and Emma Hailstone's phone going off at full volume in my pocket during Silent Night. The year had plenty of clumsiness. I also recall having plenty of contemplative shower scenes, staring at shampoo bottles and face wash, wondering things like, is math really simple? And wondering what I would do with myself if we really did have to do online school to flatten the curve. Turns out I had to focus on flattening more than one curve with gyms closing and the availability of snacks increasing. As the classic love interest goes, I had plenty of awkward things during my high school career.
There's a small dating pool at Mazer, which allows one to have awkward pasts with almost everyone, whether they dated your crush or you used to date them. None of my love interests seemed to save the day like in the movies, but some of them did sort of die socially for me since the awkwardness could never be moved on from, and I wouldn't be surprised if people wanted to run away from my past self. There were also plenty of twists this school year. Awkward things broke up, and I wasn't alone in not landing the role I wanted in the school play, but we couldn't have 4 Bells and 5 Mrs. Potts, now could we? Of course, the ultimate world-changing event was COVID-19. One moment, I was talking with a friend about how it probably wouldn't even touch Utah, then 2 weeks later, school and everything else was shutting down. It's all right, though. We'll survive not going back to school. We just need to learn how to survive quarantine. I still found myself as a blonde running at full speed away from her problems when COVID-19 hit. Something you'll notice about those classic horror movies is that they never resolve until the helpless blonde becomes less helpless and figures out how to face the monster. I needed to face my problems too for them to go away. So, instead of dragging around my feelings for a boy who decided to let go, I've decided to let go too. I've also faced the fact that skipping meals and using school as a distraction from hunger wasn't a healthy diet plan. I've finally learned how to eat healthy in an actually healthy way, and I'm feeling much more comfortable and confident in how I am. I still have a couple more problems to face, like figuring out how math can be simple enough for me to get a 4 on the modified BC Calc test, but I've found that since COVID-19 hit, my mental and physical health have only gotten better. Before, I used my busy schedule to hide from my problems, but now that I've had to face my monsters, I've started defeating them. There's a reason why I like horror movies so much. It's because people have to be brave in them, and it makes me feel like I can be brave too. In the end, the monsters are usually defeated, and that's how senior year will turn out too. Next, we'll have Claire Felt.
Thick as thieves. I slightly wish that this were the Oscars. If that was so, then I would only have 45 seconds to speak, and if I went over that time, the microphone would cut out. Sadly, though, this isn't the Oscars. And as much as I'd like this to be a completely wonderful, spontaneous culmination of all original work, I'm gonna have to say that that is not what this is. I must tell you now, before it's too late, that I am a thief. Now, if I had created something completely original, it would likely be complete nonsense. Because we're all thieves. Whether you notice it or not, you steal every day. Our specific brand of thievery encompasses everything in our lives. The only difference is this: you and I, we steal ideas. While you may have come up with an essay topic that no one has ever written before, that idea came from somewhere else and was influenced by something else. The design behind all the clothes we wear, the book plots we read, even the plans we have for our lives. Nothing around us is ever perfectly original. And that's why you can steal it. Now, please, see this in the metaphorical sense. I am not telling you to steal a car because illegal thievery is bad for a reason. But if you can take an idea or a trait and weave it into something that is your own, then you can steal like an artist. Through our lives, we've picked up habits, traits, and personality quirks that have created who we are today. While Austin Kleon went over this idea in his best-selling book, he centered his topic on physical art. The ideas that I'm imploring you to think about deal with who you are and who you want to be. Do you want to be an athlete? Do you want to be a singer, a straight-A student, or just a better student? Do you want to be a kinder person, more humble, more creative, you name it? There are so many avenues to get where you want to go. But if any of you are like me, then you might get stressed out at the very thought of trying to become the person you aspire to be. My advice is don't try and start from square one. Instead, try thievery. Find others who model those things you want to become. Study the people and things you look up to in life. Take an idea and transform it into your own. Don't imitate, emulate, and make sure to give credit where credit is due. Through my years at Mazer, one of the most important things I've learned is how to be me. While I did learn things like science, sentence diagramming, really good insults from Mr. Watabe, and how to properly say Gia from Mr. Harmer, I've also learned how to make friends, create habits through research, and steal. That is how I learned to be myself. Stealing like an artist was taught in Mrs. Slade's class, when she sang and danced to teach us about covalent bonds, and I learned how to enjoy learning. Stealing personality traits was taught when Mr. Dowdle yelled, "Get in uniform!" because I learned respect. Instilling a habit was taught every day. When I learned what it meant to truly care about others. When my teachers would stay late just to help me with one math problem. When I overheard Printcom talking about what they did at 3 a.m. in the morning while working on our yearbook. Or when my coach pulled me aside just to ask if I was doing okay. These kinds of behaviors are worth taking. I am so grateful that humans are thieves, because it means that even if I didn't know it, I was being influenced one way or the other into becoming a better person. And what more can we hope for out of life? So I tell you now, whether you be a 7th grader, a freshie, a senior, or even a graduate, become the person you want to be by thievery. You emulate rather than imitate. And you take ideas and attributes and you make them your own because, in the end, the only original work in the world is you. But you get to decide what creates you. And Mazer has been and still can be the best place to start your masterpiece. Thank you.
Next will be John Hendricks.
Mazer Fellowship. There are days that stick with you forever. You can remember almost everything. The sun shining through the windows, the delicious Kneader's buttermilk syrup, and the blue Vans you wear every day. These days usually are the most impactful of your life, and the majority of the time, you don't know when they are coming. I had one of those days my sophomore year. Cody and I were at Kneader's eating breakfast. I chose the pancakes, of course. Our intentions were to hang out and have some good pancakes, but Cody and I did not know what our conversation would lead to. Through the flow of the conversation, I told my dear friend Cody that I had a pornography problem and had for a few years. I'm not telling you this as a confession or making my last lecture to scare you straight. This is merely a small point in the greater lesson. The reason I share this is to teach that we are all on our own journey and surrounded by mentors and friends that will help us. Cody did just that. He helped me like a loyal companion would. He loved me and guided me, lifted me up, and caused me to act for good. I felt like I was Frodo from the film masterpiece known as The Lord of the Rings. Without Frodo's friends and group to support him, he would have been lost on his way and fallen under the dark powers of the ring. It was Sam who carried him through the last part of the journey, and it was Sam who helped him destroy the ring and rid Middle-earth of evil. Cody was my Sam. There was great help from many people, not just Cody. If it was just Cody, I do not think I could give this address. My fellowship is made up of people like Kara, Ms., May, Mrs. Cannon, and Simmons, and others who helped me. My loyal friend Kara was the first person I told in the 8th grade. I was sitting in my basement with my cracked iPad in fear she would judge me, but the exact opposite. She showed me great love and expressed how much she hoped I could get better and overcome my trial. Kara is my Aragorn. I learned that when I shared with the right people, I had more people to keep me accountable. Ms. was one who helped push me the most. I view her like a second mom, so I tried my best to heed to her advice. Ms. was my Gandalf. I have found my fellowship at Mazer. It has changed over the years, but since 7th grade, I have surrounded myself with people who lift me up just as Frodo's friends lifted him. My advice to you is find your own fellowship like Frodo and I have done. Be mindful of who is in your fellowship. You want friends and peers who will uplift you. Going at life challenges alone is an impossible task. It is important you have the right people beside you. Imagine Frodo's journey if he didn't have his friends to help him. Don't try to fight your battles alone. Find your fellowship and enjoy the journey, and don't make it harder than it needs to be. Find someone like Gandalf, who will show you right and wrong and teach you the way to go. Find someone like Aragorn, who has faith in you always and believes you can do anything. Get a friend like Pippin. With their infectious sense of humor, they will always make you smile. Most importantly, get a friend like Sam, who will never give up on you, no matter what. They'll always stay by your side and lift you up to be better. They will even carry you when you do not have the strength. Find a fellowship like Frodo, people who love you and support you and want to make sure you succeed in your journey. Mazer is filled with people who can support you. The best way to find them is by telling people your struggles and being honest with yourself and others. I have been blessed to have loyal friends to help me along my journey. And what I hope more than anything is that every single one of you can find your own Mazer Fellowship. Thank you.
Next, we will have Kara Hahn.
To all the Mazer boys I've loved before, I like you. The 3 words I dreamed my crush would say to me. From the time I was little to senior me, I adored every rom-com I watched. From the perfect depictions of awkward girls talking with crushes to the unrealistic relationships and romantic gestures, I wanted to have love like in the movies. When I came to the school, I wanted so badly to have all of the Mazer boys I loved love me too. In 7th grade, I quickly became best friends with some beautiful girls, and to no surprise, it seemed as though every boy liked them. They were outgoing, sweet, and pretty, perfectly fitting into society's standard of beauty. I couldn't help but feel as though I was falling behind. I would stare in the mirror and wonder what I had to change to get a boy to like me. I was too short, not skinny enough, I needed better clothes, I needed to change myself. My insecurity grew as I tried to please everyone around me. I would paint a picture in my head of what the perfect girl would be like, prettier, skinnier, and funnier. Not because someone told me I needed to change, but because I never saw myself as enough. With every crush I've had at Mazer, I would change. My personality would become geared towards each boy and change to what I thought would please them. I would change my music taste to how I acted in big groups, even the way I would talk. From the flirtatious teasing and cheesing each other in the middle school hallway to the feeling of your heart racing as you reach to grab hands for the first time, to the shaky, clammy hands pinning on the boutonniere at your first dance. All these boys knew I liked them. A couple even liked me too, but I still never liked myself. I craved the validation of having a boy like me, but that feeling never truly filled the void. No matter how deep the connection was, the validation I got was by believing they liked the idea of me. Another year, another crush, another connection with a new boy. This Mazer boy told me I was pretty. Simple words that normally have a big impact. A girl being told she's pretty by her crush would normally stir the butterflies in her stomach and bring a smile to her face. Except this time was different. I didn't smile, I didn't say thank you. I broke down quietly, uttering out, "I don't believe you." While crying in a Mazer boy's arm, I had a realization that changed my perspective. In my room that night, I stared at my flaws in the mirror. I found myself drained, searching for someone else's love. I finally knew I could not rely on another person's perspective of me any longer. This was when I made the change. I would get ready in the morning, not to look good for a crush, but for myself. I would plan a healthy meal, not to look skinny to other people, but to feel healthy on the inside. I began to know myself and truly feel the emptiness I thought could only be filled by others. Experiencing something new with a crush was still fun, but my value did not change based on that person. Although in this new relationship I was never perfect at loving myself, I noticed a change. I no longer needed to be prettier, skinnier, or funnier. Self-love filled my empty void. I learned to love my flaws, my strengths, and everything about me. Looking back on my Mazer experience, I grew to be grateful for all of the Mazer boys, the crushes, and the memories. I know now that it's not about how many Mazer boys love you. What's most important is if you love yourself first. Thank you.
Last, we will have Amin Hassan.
The last lecture, why it doesn't matter. This is it, the last lecture, the pinnacle event for every student at Mazer. The famous last words of dying seniors who are about to pass away and be reborn into adulthood. It's the moment when a student steps up to the stage and, clothed in the robes of wisdom, imparts their final admonition. Every student dreams of this moment. It's what our whole education has been building up to. We've spent countless desperate hours in the shower pondering this one question: what will I say? After all, this is your only chance to leave behind a legacy. It's all or nothing, home run, or strikeout. Time to find out whether or not you will be remembered. So then what will I say? I say forget about the last lecture. It doesn't matter. We as students have the misconception that life is all about defining moments. We think that legacy and worth is made manifest in the singularity of events like last lectures. We get so caught up in the words of Eminem. The moment, you own it. You better never let it go. You only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. Yo. We think that a perfect last lecture is the only way to do justice to the life we've had at Mazer. Don't get caught up in the lie. It isn't about giving the last lecture. It never was and it never will be. Who cares what your famous last words are? Who cares if it's perfect? Who cares if you capture your whole life's experience in a 5-minute speech? You shouldn't. Because here's the thing. Anyone can give a last lecture, but very few can live a last lecture. I could stand here and give the perfect speech about all the lessons I learned at Mazer. I could say, you will not get a good grade if you gamble during middle school science. True happiness comes from following passion. Buying a sailboat off of KSL, painting it orange, and calling it the Henry Hudson will get you an A on your Socratic project. And cherish your Mazer experience. You won't get another. These are important lessons, but anyone can teach those lessons by saying the exact same things I do. But only I can teach those lessons through what I do. Words have no power and authority unless you live what you say. It isn't the moment of giving the last lecture that matters, but the years after when you live it. I don't care if you glean something profound from what I'm saying in this speech, because I don't consider this to be my last lecture. Chances are that in a few weeks, when you meet that brown-eyed summer crush, you'll forget everything I've said. And you know what? That's okay. But I do have one wish. When the time comes, when we meet again in 30 years, I want you to be able to look at my life and see who I've become through living the principles of truth, honor, and virtue. I want you to see how I've lived the lessons I learned at Mazer. I want you to see how I've achieved true happiness through following my passions. I want you to observe me cherishing every moment, and I want you to notice how dedicating myself to learning continually, thinking critically, and communicating effectively has changed my life. When you see all of this and who I've become, it is then that I want you to think, wow, now that is a last lecture. A legacy is not defined by the advice given in a last lecture. Legacy is defined by how one lives what they want to say. Look around. Do you remember the last thing one of your teachers said? I don't. When I look at someone like Mr. Simmons or Mrs. Cannon, I don't see a lecture they gave. I see people who teach, not for the money, but for the individual. I see people who care. That is their legacy. So I say to you, forget about the last lecture. You can only do justice to the lessons you've learned by living them. Be someone who, when people look at you, they see what you've become and they think, man, I want to live a legacy like that. Forget about giving your last lecture and just start living it. Thank you.
And finally, this year, we wanted to honor the one Mazer senior who took the unusual circumstances of COVID-19 and creatively filmed his last lecture. Brandon, thank you for your effort, your perspective, and your creativity.
There is nothing more terrifying than to know you might get convicted of a crime you didn't commit and receive a criminal record that would ruin the rest of your life. It was September 2019, and I found myself here at the Provo Police Department. This is a place where a real-life detective took me into a small investigation room with a two-way mirror and interrogated me just like the movies. It was truly one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. Now, to explain how I got here, let's come here to Coldstone Creamery in Provo. It was September 11th of last year. I had been working here about a year when one late night I got scammed. Malicious people brewed up a well-crafted plan to steal money from unsuspecting employees, a perfect target being myself, a totally unsuspecting, naive teenager. Now, I don't want to go into details because it brings me physical pain retelling the story. I've tried to block that experience out of my brain, so reliving it all over again is very, very uncomfortable. But to make a long story short, I got scammed. And after I got scammed, the police department and my mother thought that I had stolen the money. Luckily, I don't have a criminal record, and I learned some valuable lessons, so things worked out. But my long story is not what's important. What is important is that I didn't listen to a small voice in my head. While I was getting scammed, there was a small voice in the back of my head whispering to me, maybe this is not a good idea. My conscience was telling me the right thing to do, but pressure from others, fear, and exhaustion clouded it, so I couldn't hear it. If you Google what's the definition of conscience, it will say an inner feeling or voice viewed as acting as a guide to the rightness or wrongness of one's behavior. So by definition, it's your brain using your moral compass to decipher between good and bad decisions, like having an angel or a devil on your shoulder. But I believe your conscience is much greater than that. and has the potential to make a tremendous impact on your life. To explain myself, let me take you to the Mazer track here. Late last year, I found myself pacing around this track, absolutely terrified, knowing that in a few minutes, I would have to walk inside and recite a memorized monologue to Mr. Holtz and Miss Smith. I was not an actor, and what I was doing was totally out of my comfort zone. Why would I do that to myself? Because earlier I had a choice. I could either try out for Shakespeare or not try out for Shakespeare. Neither of those choices were bad, but my conscience was still trying to tell me something. It was telling me to try out for Shakespeare, a new and exciting experience. The rational, reasoning part of my brain was battling my conscience with self-doubt and fear of failure. It was telling me, I'm not an actor, I'll just look like a fool. Even if I try out, I'll lose all the good roles to more experienced actors. Thank heavens I listened to my conscience. Because of that one decision to listen to my conscience, I discovered new talents, met amazing people, landed the role as the Beast, won 3rd place at the Shakespeare Festival, and composed music alongside Sam Carden, a famous composer. Our consciences aren't just used to differentiate between good and bad decisions. Our conscience helps show us opportunities that will change our lives. Yours may be telling you to have that uncomfortable conversation you've been dreading for years. It may be telling you to try out for the new sport or learn that new instrument. It may tell you to treat your mother a little more kindly or talk to that friend you haven't seen in a while. In any case, you'll have excuses to not listen to your conscience, just like I did when I was trying to decide whether to audition or not. If you ignore all the excuses and listen to your conscience, which is most often telling you to do something difficult and uncomfortable, I know it will change your life in ways you are not expecting.
Our 3rd place winner is Claire Felt. Here you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Our 2nd place winner is Carson Bailey. Nice. Okay. And our 1st place winner is Ammon Hassan.